message, which I guess if you look at the OP and you look at what he said, that I feel like that sentiment is shared amongst a lot of gamers. It's like, hey, I had this character, it has too many memories, so I'm not leveling it. And I feel like Legacy 30, I mean, I guess at least my personal take on it is Legacy 30 was a way for me to maybe not necessarily maintain the same level my character left off at, but still maintain the legacy vibe of the character while still breathing life into it by putting it somewhere in which I can actually actively engage in something. Whereas at 27, there's fucking fuck all to do, so.
I mean, well said. I'd imagine you had the Warglaves at level 27, right?
Yeah, I had him at 70, like back, before we even had a level squish. And I think I got my last one in 2013 or 2014.
Okay, that's got to be frustrating if you got the Warglaves, but you can't even, like, actually enter into a raid at level 27.
Yeah.
That's so stupid.
That was the thing. Like my old 70 warrior had Sulfuris, Thunder Fury, and Warglaves. My hunter had Thoradel and what's it called, Thunder Fury. Like none of it. Like they couldn't use any of it. It's all gone. So I leveled all those characters to 30 at this point, so I can't use them again. But
yeah. Okay, so the point of this one that we're going to be doing is just talking about the rogue class, and I've said it before, you've heard me say it. When I think of rogue, especially at our bracket, the first thing I think of is usually Blackberry. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So because of that, you're the one I would want to talk to you about this, and the entire point of this is just discussing about what would make the rogue class better, because unfortunately it is a fun class, it's really bad at this bracket.
Yeah. So
from an expert rogue, what would you suggest to make it better? We could talk about all three specs, it's just really what you want to pitch out.
I can talk about all three specs. I wouldn't say I'd be able to get down to the numbers specifically, like I don't have anything like that, but I've hit a target dummy on almost every single spec throughout the expansions and some of the major patches that change things. So I can give a rough determination as to like what would be better for each spec. And honestly, it's funny because it's a roundabout answer for all three specs. And it honestly is an all-encompassing for just physical DPS in the bracket in general. That would be a fix.
Well, by all means, good start. You can start with Assassination if you like.
Yeah, I like Assassination a lot. It's become my preferred spec because of how RNG heavy Outlaw is. Outlaw is a lot of fun to play around. If you don't get the right buffs, you're gonna feel bad. And now with our like current talent selection and tree, you can't opt out of Fatal Flourish as Outlaw, which that's just a quick thing for Outlaw. But Assassination, I think it has some of the best AoE consistently, and it's probably your best single target outside of a 5 buff from Outlaw. It's got a lot of powerful, like, I guess, abilities. Deathmark is probably the strongest one that you can get. Mutilate is a very hard-hitting ability that gives you multiple combo points as well. Venomous Wounds is just extremely strong for energy regen, along with us having the Heart Pierce, which is another option for energy regen.
Non-heroic version, of course.
Yes, the non-heroic version. And it's a shame that we don't get mastery buff for bleeds too, because that would obviously make this spec so much stronger. And that, honestly, if we're speaking directly to Assassination, would probably be enough to make Assassination viable, like much more viable than it is. I think it can stand against most of the specs, but obviously not S tier. I think if you gave mastery bonus to bleeds for Assassination as well, I think you would really see it shoot way ahead of where it's at right now.
So you think it wouldn't help if you just farmed out like a bunch of Warforged gear? I'm assuming you have that.
No, yeah, I do. So I have a lot of the old TBC gear that I refarmed for sockets. I have some of the ICC pieces along with what we had talked about with the normal version of Heart Pierce. For the energy regen, I've ran Dancing Steel, Elemental Force, Gale Force, like Sophic Devotion when we were able to put that on our weapons. And it doesn't matter what mixture of gear that you have. Now, obviously, if bleeds went into the damage multiplier for mastery, then yes, I could make an argument that you go farm Warforged gear, since that would be one of your only options for mastery gear. But in this current situation where poisons are our only gateway for mastery, no. Poisons just don't do enough damage for mastery to make that big of a effect to our damage.
So what talents do you think would benefit it quite a bit to help it at least boost its DPS? Because I think Assassination's the strongest of the three, right?
I think consistently it is. Outlaw in AoE, I think, can really hit some big burst numbers with Killing Spree, but outside of that cooldown, it would be Assassination. And obviously the buffs, like the buff roulette with Outlaw, kind of determines that as well. I think Thistle Tea, I think that across the board, I mean the talent Thistle Tea, not the consumable, to be clear. I think the talent Thistle Tea at the very bottom of the rogue tree across the board would be a massive buff to all three rogue specs. I think it would benefit sub and assassination a little bit more, because for assassination, for example, since we're talking about it, being able to have a full energy bar so that every single time you hit that envenom, every subsequent attack afterwards, increasing the amount of poison applications and or like amounts of mutilates for poison applications you can get in each one of those energy windows. So being able to replenish your energy like that is extremely significant for obviously the synergy of applying all of your dots as assassination and then also making huge, I guess, goes of your envenom windows.
See, I'm not much of a rogue player. I'm trying to keep up with this. Like, I played my rogue for a little while. I just wasn't able to make it work too well. But I kind of have, like, an idea of what you're saying.
Yeah, I play rogue too much. I play it on every version of the game.
Yeah, see, if this is Monk, this would have been my bread and butter.
That's fair. That's definitely what I consider you as, if not a hunter as well.
Oh, the damn hunter. So, it's a little off topic for the meantime, but I did have a question for you. Do you think we would benefit with Rogue if we had Fangs of the Father?
So,
because I know it's like the Rogue Legendary, and it's not too far off of what we should be able to get, assuming we're ever going to get Cataclysm.
So the Legacy set bonus, as far as I am aware, is disabled, because I have a 32 Rogue with them, and I believe they're disabled. I haven't logged into that character for a while, but they were the last time I logged into them. So that, the answer would be flat no in its current state. If they gave you Fangs of the Father with a working Legacy set bonus, I could argue that yes, they would make a significant increase, because I play Cataclassic currently right now, and I can tell you right now that Fangs of the Father are obscene weapons. I mean, in PvP and in PvE, they're absolutely crazy. I mean, we're talking like spitting 5 combo point eviscerates like 6 times during the window of the buff, which is a significant increase to DPS if you're talking in PvE for 30. But I think the overarching problem, and why even if you had that buff, it still wouldn't be as large of a, I guess, increase as you're looking for to make Rogue gap a little bit between like your Shadow Priest, for example, since we'll just go ahead with the highest DPS ceiling that you have at the bracket right now. I think it's just a problem with weapons in general. I think weapon DPS is too low,
At least
way too low. Yeah, and I think that is a major problem. There's weapon DPS all over the place. There is not the same. So like TBC and Wrath of the Lich King and Classic all have roughly the same DPS numbers, which kind of makes sense since the eye levels have been squished together. But even in the same normal ICC or in TBC with the same eye level, the damage per second varies along with the damage range varies. And now that there's no weapon speed differential, it doesn't really make sense that any of that would happen, and it's never to a considerable enough margin to make a difference. So Rogue itself, along with a lot of the other physical DPS that use melee weapons, you just feel like you hit a lot, but they're all very underwhelming hits because you just do not have good enough weapons to give you enough weapon damage to see those white numbers or your ability damage give you anything. And I feel like that's just written in the code of the way that the game works right now. Because if you look at the talent tree and you look in the bottom of the talent tree for any of the specs for any class, but specifically since we're talking about rogue, I don't want to deviate from that. You see that a lot of it just buffs the ability damage, or buffs the amount of times you can use the ability, or buffs your dots, or whatever it is for whichever spec you're playing. And I think that's why they're not worried about the weapon DPS as much, even though it's the legacy level and they wouldn't care anyway. I think that's just kind of how the game is built right now, is that Blizzard has just built compounding bonuses to abilities so the damage of your weapon doesn't make as big of a difference in the game anymore at all. Period.
Yeah.
And so we're feeling that effect right now at 30 a lot, just because of how everything's squished to 30 classic TBC Wrath of the Lich King.
Well, that's pretty well said. Did you have anything else you wanted to put in for assassination?
No, I think it's pretty cut and dry. It's got its single target spec and then its AoE spec like you would consider with anything else, which is I think what makes it the best to play at 30. Just because it has a nice rotation for AoE and it has a nice single target rotation. You've got just I guess a little added thing is Sanguine Blades, which you can get, which used to be, I think that's actually a new talent. But Sanguine Blades makes the rotation of assassination a little more fun because you're having to watch your energy in order to maintain getting that damage. But it kind of makes it, depending on the situation you're in, it kind of makes it unmanageable in some cases, depending on how many targets you have or what kind of content you're doing and what else you have to pay attention to. And since we don't have 300 energy or whatever you have at max level, we it's hard to manage that buff.
I didn't
That's just
know.
kind of a random thing. Yeah.
I didn't even know you get that much at max level. I thought like the highest
Yeah.
you'd be able to
Yeah,
get on a
you-
rogue's like 150.
Now, I think so. I might be speaking because I play Outlaw at max level, or did play Outlaw at max level. I believe you get 300 during Adrenaline Rush, maybe, which is where I'm pulling that number. So it might be Outlaw exclusive there, actually.
Okay. Well, since we're on the subject of Outlaw, you want to begin?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me go ahead and swap to that spec. Yeah, Outlaw is probably my biggest disappointment in the entire retail WoW space. I remember in Legion, because I've played throughout almost every single expansion. BFA is when I took a big break from retail and went more into classic, but I've still relatively played. When it came in Legion, I kind of liked the way that it played. I still didn't like that they removed Combat Rogue. I really liked playing Combat Rogue. But Outlaw had its place, and it was built around buffs, but the RNG seemed to be a lot less heavy. And what I mean by that is it felt a lot easier to get multiple Roll the Bones buffs, especially after they buffed it after the first patch. Between the Eyes felt really great because you did a ton of damage, and it was a stun. Excuse me one second. Ugh. Wow, that was weird. And you had a lot of abilities that did a lot of damage. I like how it's changed now, where Between the Eyes is kind of a modifier for Critical Strike, since Critical Strike is one of your strongest secondary stats. Versatility and Critical Strike are like your two main secondaries for Outlaw, even at 30. They just perform higher than any of the other ones. You get enough baseline mastery, where stacking mastery after a certain point doesn't really give you much more of a benefit than crit or versatility will. So it's kind of not worth using. But Outlaw Rogue kind of falls in the same category as the other rogues, where in the rogue tree, you kind of have to go into acrobatic strikes with how many points you have. You don't really have a lot of deviation from that. So it's a great talent, but it's all you can do. There's not really anything else that's better. You can play around a little bit towards the right side of the tree in what's called Tight Spender. It's the energy cost of finishing moves is reduced by 6%, makes the rotation a little bit easier, and again, saving as much energy as possible or regaining as much energy as possible is about the best thing that you can do for Outlaw to increase your DPS, truthfully. Like, energy is the one thing that increases your DPS more than anything for any spec, and that's been true for every expansion of WoW subsequently. But at 30, because of the weapon DPS being so insignificant, and your abilities being so significant towards your damage or buffing your auto attacks, anything that helps you regain energy or reduce the energy that you spend is extremely helpful. And that's why I guess my next point is, in the Outlaw tree, Fatal Flourish has to be chosen, which kind of sucks. Because there's a lot of, in that area, you can tell that Blizzard made it around that talent, just not expecting you to play it at 30 specifically forever. It does kind of cut the fun out of what you can do with your talents as Outlaw, and it kind of makes it to where you can only choose Devious Stratagem or Killing Spree. Which, Killing Spree is extremely fun, but it doesn't do as much damage as I feel like it should be doing. And it's kind of, even with Restless Blades, it feels a little punishing and a lot longer of a cooldown, especially now that they've made it where it is a combo finisher instead of just an ability. Because it used to be just an ability, now you have to use combo points, which I don't like.
So it's going to be a little weird for me to ask, because I actually honestly do not know. Rogue was one of those, like, I always said I would never play a Rogue, a Mage, or a Paladin, like, as long as I've been playing this game. So I don't actually know what combat even was.
Okay.
What would be the difference between that and Outlaw? I think I said that weird.
No, you're okay. So, combat, when it first started, you legitimately felt like a warrior that used energy. Truthfully. It didn't really have anything that made it different. Adrenaline Rush was the main ability that you've had from Classic. That basically separated you from the other rogue specs. And there was a backstab spec and there was a sword spec for combat, and that was the only thing that you had going for you. A little bit later, combat, when it gained mastery, started kind of playing around mastery being your main gouge, which it's changed a little bit. So it's gone through two different changes. One is increasing the frequency by point of mastery, how many times your main gouge procs. And the other one is increasing the damage that each proc of it does with a baseline amount, or a baseline proc chance. And so when combat became that, which is in MOP, when it increases the frequency of the amount of times that your main gouge procs based on your mastery, combat felt probably its best. It was really good in PvE and in PvP. It felt kind of like still that warrior that used energy, but they gave you a lot more. I guess since you had prep at that time, you could double vanish in PvP, you could double vanish for ambushes in PvE. You also had Killing Spree as well, which again was a baseline ability at this time and not a combo spenter. You had Shadow Blades, which was just an absurd ability, which all specs got. It just really meshed super well with combat because you had so many things that would increase your attack speed as a combat rogue. It felt really good to play, but in a, I guess, an overarching way to answer your question, I can also give the answer as to why I know Blizzard changed combat and Adrenaline Rush as a whole. And it's because it got to a point where combat had so many abilities and it was built around energy regeneration and attacks per second so much that eventually it got to the point where it was hard to use so many abilities without overcapping energy. And it started to kind of feel a little bit too much like a warrior that used energy. You started to kind of lose the identity as a rogue after a while. Stealth really wasn't a thing for you. It started being, you would stealth and then pre-pot in PvE before you open on a boss. Then it was just, you just pre-pot and run into the boss with sprint, and stealth doesn't even become a thing. Ambush wasn't really worth pressing anymore. So combat itself, it kind of lost its rogue identity, which is why I believe they just went ahead and changed it into Outlaw. because it hadn't really felt like rogue, or I guess your class fantasy of assassination slash subtlety. Combat didn't really feel like it fit in as much at that point.
Does Outlaw even play like that? Because I feel like Outlaw feels weird whenever I go into stealth because I keep thinking I'm playing like a pirate.
And that's the thing, is I think they meant it to feel that way. I don't think they really wanted Outlaw to play more roguelike. I think they made it like a pirate class fantasy slash really strong melee that was built around all this RNG to give it its own identity away from rogue. Like, it is still a rogue. You can still stealth, you can still sap, you know, tricks of the trade, things like that. You have all your classic rogue abilities. But I feel like they were more or less not worried about making it feel like a rogue as much as following on what it felt like while keeping it in its own lane.
Because, like, I remember, I think it was Legion. I was reading something on Wowhead, and they were talking about Roll the Bones, and I think that's what made me want to play Rogue a little bit because I thought that was really cool that it was like RNG based. I don't know. I like to gamble, so like rolling dice is kind of a fun thing for me. But
Yeah,
I never knew like the difference between the two were, and I always thought it was kind of weird because like in my head with combat, I always thought it was like the melee, the fist weapon spec. That's how I always kind of thought it was, but I never actually looked into it.
Yeah, it was, so really early combat, it wasn't even a specific weapon type. There were different talents that would increase specific things for your class based on what weapon you used. So you had sword specialization that would give you more auto attacks.
Oh, that's right.
Fist weapon specialization gave you critical strike, for example. And another thing that I wanted to mention was, so before Roll the Bones, and when it was still combat, there was something called Bandit's Guile, which I believe made its way into Shadowlands as one of your legendary affixes, or however Shadowlands dealt with legendaries. And it was this stacking buff that you got as you press Sinister Strike or Revealing Strike that would go from a green buff, which was 10% increased damage, to a yellow buff, which was 20% increased damage, to a red buff that was 30% increased damage. And that was kind of the RNG element that you played around as combat before it became Outlaw.
I see.
And a note on Roll the Bones and gambling, I believe there was a time when you played, and Legion was a long time ago, so I don't, like, I might be wrong here, but I liked when it first came out because I believe if you had one buff from Roll the Bones, you could choose to re-roll. And I like the ability to kind of, I don't want to say spam Roll the Bones, but I think you should be able to, because energy is your most important resource and your most important DPS gain, I think if you want to spend the energy to Roll the Bones again because you don't like the Roll the Bones you got, I think you should be able to do that, truthfully. I don't like that Roll the Bones Sonic cooldown. I think it's even more punishing. If you're going to put RNG on a class, I don't think you should make it punishing. And Roll the Bones is punishing.
What is it, like a 30-second cooldown?
Rather. Let me double check, just so that I'm not guessing there. It's 45 seconds, so worse.
Oh, that's way worse.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
Restless Blades, I believe... Yeah, okay, so Restless Blades does reduce the cooldown of it. But at 30, again, you're not hitting as many abilities or as many finishers as you are at max level. So at 30, it's still a long cooldown. Regardless of how many finishers you can only get so many in at 30. So Roll the Bones still feels punishing if you get a bad buff. And there are some buffs that are good in a long fight, but in 30, when you have a lot of shorter fights, there are some buffs that you can just write off your DPS that pull.
What would you say would be the best class to play as a rogue? Or I'm sorry, the race. The race.
Oh, race. Okay, so personally, I think the best race to play is Troll. Your attack speed and your energy regeneration is vital, and both of those things give you energy regen. So Outlaw, for example, Fatal Flourish, the more times you're attacking, the more chances you're going to have to get energy regeneration, along with combat potency. For Assassination, that extra attack speed is just going to increase the amount of times you apply bleeds. Subtlety is pretty underwhelming, but again, increased attack speed is still just going to increase its damage across the board. I can't really think of another racial that is going to give more benefit than attack speed.
You know, I wasn't even going to consider troll. I was expecting you, like, half-assed to say Blood Elf or just be a troll and say fucking Volpira.
No way.
Because everyone keeps wanting to play that.
Yeah, no. I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what the Volpira racial is.
It's actually pretty good. It does quite a bit of damage.
Okay.
It's like a little bomb or something. But
Maybe that's situationally better. To my knowledge, I think troll is best. I haven't played around with that, so I'll open up with that. But.
I mean, I definitely take berserking over that any day.
Yeah.
So I guess since we went into old territory with combat, the last one to discuss would be sub, which is actually my favorite of the three. I know it's pretty underwhelming at 30, but I don't know. It's just something about it with Shadow Step. I really like it.
I really like sub. I've played all specs of Rogue throughout the entire time I played Rogue. I played Rogue for about 19 years on retail, on classic, private servers, every expansion you could think of. And subtlety has always been extremely fun to me. I'm also a big PvPer, so subtlety is, for most expansions, the PvP spec. The other ones have their niche, but not really outside of a couple expansions. If you look at the talent tree for sub at 30 and what you get, you would expect a lot better of a DPS breakdown. All of these abilities that you get, you would know from playing Rogue for a little while that they are extremely strong. Like Shadow Blades, I mentioned a little bit earlier. What a strong cooldown. You've got Shadow Dance and then improved Shadow Dance on top of that to give it 2 more seconds. You have Double Dance that you can get at 30, which gives you a second Shadow Dance. You can choose Gloom Blade if you want. You get Shadow Technique, which is an absurdly, especially when that first came out, that was one of the strongest DPS cooldowns for all specs of Rogue. And it just doesn't scale well. It is not good at 30.
That's unfortunate. I actually
So
got,
I
was gonna say, I actually got Shadow Step and Shadow Dance confused. Shadow Dance is the one I was talking about.
Shadow Step is also an amazing ability. When it first came in, it also increased the damage you dealt on your next ambush or garrote. So it made it even better. Like, you know, you do PvP and you Shadow Step even though you're already behind the target just to get the damage bonus from it. But I do like Shadow Step. I prefer Shadow Step over Grappling Hook. Grappling Hook, especially from a PvP standpoint, Grappling Hook, it's too choreographed. Somebody can see you come in to try to kick him.
What would you recommend would be a good way to fix the spec to make it a little bit better?
I think sub just it kind of falls under the same umbrella.
It's not like a specific
DPS.
talent it's missing.
I think not getting Relentless Strikes, if you want me to go into a specific talent, I think not getting Relentless Strikes and then having to choose between Gloomblade, Secret Technique, and Double Dance, I think is a problem. Because I would say those are all the kind of the strongest things that you can get at 30, looking at the talent tree and from playing it a little bit. And Relentless Strikes is something that has been in the sub tree forever. It has been a subtlety specific thing for a long time, if not just in an open talent tree, if just dedicated to that spec. And that essentially is your finishing moves will give you energy based per combo point. So at 5 combo points, it'll give you 25 energy, which is a significant chunk of energy, which I think is kind of vital to the way that sub plays, which is just a really kind of bursty, you work around Shadow Dance and Shadow Blades playstyle. I guess the same thing that I already said. I think Rogue, as fun as it can be with the amount of cooldowns that you have, because truthfully at 30, you still do have full toolkits for all 3 specs. Like, you do have buttons to press. It does feel like a valuable class to play if you're looking for buttons, you know, like a flushed rotation that you have. I do like that because coming back to Twink stuff on retail usually felt like you were missing half your toolkit, which you are technically, but you know what I mean. There's a big difference between playing a really janky amount of spells on a class at 30 because it just doesn't have a proper fleshed out rotation to use or it feels punishing to do versus a fluid one that feels really nice to play. I'm sure going through the expansions on your 30 even you felt your favorite one, Monk, sometimes run into that. I feel like Rogue is not at that. Rogue has the abilities to press. It has fun abilities to use. It is just extremely underwhelming, the damage output. And I guess all I would want to say is if anybody that's playing 30 wants to play a Rogue, I don't think you should take the everybody saying you shouldn't play it, it sucks. Although I am also come from the same cloth of do top DPS or you're not doing well, granted. I think that each class has its own thing, and Rogue has the type of cooldowns for crunch time to actually have a good time or save a raid on a cooldown or any other number of things. And so I think it's still worth playing if that's the kind of thing you play. And I know myself, I played Rogue for almost 2 decades. So for me, it still feels nice even though I'm not top DPS. Because there were plenty of expansions where I was PvEing and I was in the top percentile. I was not top DPS.
Well, see, this is why I always just say for people to play what they want. Like, it's not really a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever get mad at anybody for playing something like a Rogue. And, I mean, people can't even really meme on it too much anyways, because in the last tournament we had, the Time Walking guys, they actually won one of the dungeons using an Outlaw Rogue.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, you can make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is a lot of people don't look at the cooldowns that they have. Like you can use, so for example, in a dungeon tourney, you can use Vanish to pull mob packs, and on their leash you can run all past them for a skip. You've got Tricks of the Trade, which is, I believe you also, as a hunter, have a threat redirect, but I believe those are the only 2 classes that have threat redirects at this level. So that's another big thing, especially with how much AoE rogues can put out in a really small burst window. So if you want to make like a non-healer comp where the DPS can just pump, that's a lot of snap threat to put on a tank, so all the DPS can just AoE things down instantly without having to worry about take threat. Yeah, Shroud of Concealment, I mean, that's an insane cooldown, truthfully. I don't know. I feel like I would just go on forever with how much I enjoy playing Rogue, so I'll just stop it at that.
No, dude, this is literally why I say when I think of Rogue, I think of you, because no one else is going to talk or give this kind of explanation on the class to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like even... So in retail, I probably have 14 or 15 rogues, and then on Classic, I have probably 9, and we're only in Cataclysm at this point. So, a lot of rogue.
You excited for Mista Pandaria?
I am. I've been playing on the beta a lot, and speaking of PvP, Combat Rogue becomes a pretty viable PvP spec.
Oh yeah, you can still play that.
In Mista Pandaria. Yep. Yep. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I guess back to the whole 30 retail Rogue, I don't engage and do a lot with you guys all the time, but I'm always viewing Discord, and if anybody has any questions, I'll always answer.
Yeah.
I have that Discord moderator mentality from being so many Discord moderators that I'm almost always checking pings and stuff like that.
I see you pop in at random times, so it's all good.
Yeah.
But, like, whenever you feel like you want to come back or anything, we're always here. That's what I always tell people that don't play every day.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I log in randomly, like, probably once a week, roughly, and just hit a target dummy for 20 minutes to see if some new weapon has changed, or watch the Discord to see if there's a new enchant that I can put on or something that I can try to change numbers. Kind of a geeky thing to do. My wife makes fun of me for it, but
hey, at least yours knows what you're doing. Every time I play, mine always just kind of yells at me.
I don't know. She plays WoW with me.
Yeah, I can't get her to do that. All she wants to play is Fortnite. That or Hogwarts Legacy, so it's not the same experience.
Oh wow, yeah, no. Now we play WoW and Phasmophobia. She played retail for a little while, um, but she didn't stick with it. She doesn't play it all the time.
All right, I guess we're gonna go ahead and end it there. But I just
Okay.
realized we didn't actually introduce you. Do you want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Blackberry. I've been around World of Warcraft since 2007, 2008, somewhere around that time. I've been playing Rogue since that time. I've been in the Twink scene for a long time. I used to be the 70 to 79 coordinator before the Squish for that Twink bracket, and then I also used to be an administrator of Twink Info. I've hopped off and on from private servers to retail throughout the expansions, and even try to stay relevant in the newest expansion for retail to try to help out Legacy 30 with Rogue, or just any sort of eclectic WoW knowledge that I have randomly tucked away. And that's me, I guess, when it comes to the game.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I'm glad we actually got to do this.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very
Yeah,
tired.
no, I am too. No, it's okay, man. That's why
I knew
messaged
you were gonna
but-
come. I knew you were gonna come tonight. I just didn't know when. And I said, yeah, I'll stay up late. That's fine. But I'm kind of regretting that now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine, dude. Like, I'm in my 30s now, so like, you know, back when you're younger, you could stay up to like 6 in the morning. It's like no problem. But now it's like it's 9 o'clock. Oh God.
Yeah, I'm 31. I work nights though, so I'm up at work right now. So it's
I get up at 6 a.m. This is hell on earth for me right now.
Oh shit, yeah.
Taking them off tomorrow,
man.
but it doesn't really matter. But either way.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, thank you again for coming on. It's nice to have you back on.
Of course, man.
Bring you back
Yeah.
on at some point in the future.
Yeah, no worries, man. I appreciate it. I'm glad to do it.
Of course. All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.